Hi, I'm Peggie Sherry with Faces of Courage. I am the founder and CEO. And today my guest is Dr. Shanae Simmons, and she is going to help us with a Faces of Courage empowerment session. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. What an amazing opportunity to partner with you for this very important thing that you're doing here. I'm Dr. Shanae Simmons. I'm the Executive Director of Community Victory Family Services, and I'm a therapist. That's plain and simple. I'm a therapist. I'm a counselor, but I'm also a breast cancer survivor. I have a history of working with counselors who specialize in trauma, and it is that work that led me to this topic. In doing that work, working with counselors who have committed themselves to journeying along with trauma survivors, it was important for me to make sure that I was taking care of those counselors, that I was leading them, supporting them, and guiding them well. And I did that in an organization here called Crisis Services. And during that time, I was given the opportunity to go to a training. It sounded really neat and important. And I learned about this topic called compassion fatigue. The irony of it, that took place in a very interesting time for me in my family. And I learned I actually had it. Go figure. Go figure. And so while I was so committed to preparing myself to lead a team, make sure they were healthy, and make sure that they would be able to do the very important work that they were doing for other people, I had to come to a recognition that I'm probably not as healthy as I thought I was. And that was after cancer. So
I hear that you are at your 5-year anniversary.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations. That's the huge step forward.
Yeah.
So what were the telltale signs that you had fatigue?
So I really didn't have a telltale sign initially. I was in the training, learning about this topic, right? And I'm one of those people where it's get as much as you can get done, kill 2, 3, 4, 5 birds with one stone. And so, I'm not embarrassed to say, the training was in Orlando. It fell on the weekend of my daughter's, I think it was her 16th birthday. And unfortunately, the country was dealing with something really heavy at the time, with very public murder of a minority gentleman. And so I thought it was important to have my family at that, be together in that time. And so during the training, I was being pulled in 55 different directions. I felt I had a client who was calling me in the middle of the train. It was just like, can y'all let me go? I can't breathe. And I found myself, and I should have kept the picture because I took a picture. I found myself eating Burger King in the bathroom.
How did that happen? Just for peace of mind, a quiet place?
It's the only place I could find to express, just kind of not worry about what people are thinking, not worry about having to meet someone else's needs, not worrying about anything. I had to go to the restroom. I did have to go to the restroom. And it was lunchtime. And during lunchtime, we just happened to have some conflict. I don't even like Burger King, really, to tell you the truth. It's going to be one of the last places I choose to go. So that was even more profound for me, that this is what I was reduced to in this moment, where I was really thinking I was being responsible, a responsible parent, a responsible supervisor, a responsible leader, a responsible stakeholder, because the training was being funded by an organization in Hillsborough County. And so my responsibility wasn't just going to be to make sure my team of clinicians was well, but that I would also be communicating this message throughout the county. So I thought I was being responsible, but for whatever reason, that responsibility was literally choking me out in the restroom. And so I had that, I returned to the training to, they're talking about all the nuances of it. And I realized this is me. I need to do something different. And when I realized that, I did take that picture, and it's funny because they talked about, when you tell the story and you do the trainings, you need to make it personal. I was like, well, I got a story to tell. Burger King in the bathroom.
So what steps, when someone has gotten to the point, I always say that, when we have caregivers that come to us and they're struggling with someone who is fighting cancer, and it's a very hard, long battle. And I always say, you know what, you can always cry in the shower. So I never thought to tell them they could eat McDonald's in the bathroom. But what are some of the coping mechanisms that when you feel like you're becoming overwhelmed and you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do as a result of compassionate care?
If I could back us up a little bit before getting to those steps, I want to make sure we're all on the same playing field of what we're talking about, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Compassion fatigue, caregiver fatigue is, simply put, the cost of caring. And I have to be careful, because when you hear therapists and the work that I do, people don't want labels. They don't want to be considered broken and all of this. And that's not what we're talking about. It's like the hazard. It's like, our nurses today, they have a hazard. They go into the workforce, and there are things that are potential that can happen. Needle sticks are possible, those kinds of things. And so when we became aware about that, we developed something called universal precautions. And so for this area of caregiving, the preferred universal precaution is actually a balanced self-care plan.
Mm-hmm.
And in this age, I have a little bit of a thing, because I believe some folks have made self-care about very commercial things, and it's not. It can include some really important commercial things. Like, I could use a massage now. I don't know about you.
Me. Yeah.
A
manicure would help.
Yes, it's
Get my hair done.
All of those things are helpful. But a lot of times, if we don't pay real close attention, we're not going to do the things that relieve us of how we got there in the first place. How do we get here? How do we get to this place? Well, some would say, well, duh, because I've got responsibilities to care for others, and those responsibilities are abundant. And so, yes, that might be true. That might be true. However, what's important to recognize is that some people with the same level of responsibility don't necessarily find themselves experiencing compassion or caregiver fatigue. There are some things that kind of predispose us to that.
Sorry, my puppies are hanging here with me.
That's okay. They are good. They are good for coping. They are good. Animals are good for coping. But one thing I will say, that you can also experience compassion and caregiver fatigue if you're treating animals, and if you're caring for animals, not just people. We find there are some folks who have discovered that, I'm actually experiencing fatigue, because they have committed themselves to a life of saving animals. I could see PETA workers having that. I could see people, very common, people in animal shelters, especially in a season like this, where there may be some families who may have abandoned their animals. So it's not just people, it's caregiving. Be really clear about that.
And isn't it important that we set limits? I spoke with a doctor once, and he ran a big clinic, and he said to me, he said, I asked him, how do you ever turn it off? Because there's people who need you 24 hours a day. They're the early wakers and the late night people. And he said, I set a limit that if I stop working at 8 p.m., I will not do anything for 12 hours. So if I stop at 8 p.m., I'm not starting till 8 a.m. the next day.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he was the first person that taught me how to put my phone at 9 p.m. to stop ringing, and my phone will not start ringing again until after 7 a.m.
Me
Except for
too.
my children. My children gets through. But I think it's really important to, and no one's died for me doing this, to
Right.
set limits of what you're going to do for other people.
You raise a good point. So one of the things that can make us more prone for compassion fatigue or caregiver fatigue is an absence of personal boundaries. And so when you talk about setting limits, you're talking about boundaries. So for me, I use my voicemail very strategically. If I don't recognize the number, it goes to voicemail. I'll listen to the voicemail, see if it's something I need to respond to. But because I also come from environments that have really placed high demands on my time, my energy, my resources, I also use voicemail for people who I love dearly, like my mom. I I will make a decision about whether or not what they are reaching out for in that moment is something I have the opportunity or the motivation to address in that time. It doesn't mean I'm not going to ever get back to them, but I might need to prepare myself to respond to that, especially for folks who come out of high crisis populations where it's like every other day there's a crisis. It's really important to be mindful about how you engage that. One strategy that would respond to that is called empathic discernment. And so you want to be empathic, right? We want to be compassionate, we want to be sensitive, we want to be responsive, but discerning whether or not this is the time and the place for you to do that. Maybe you need a nap before you go to the hospital. Maybe you need to send a sibling instead of you being at mom and dad's bedside every day. So really being discerning about whether or not you can personally respond to the challenges that are in front of you.
Good point. Delegate. Maybe there's some things that you can delegate. I always, I think that we become heroes and that we try to do everything and that we know that we are responsible, so we're the ones that will run to the grocery store and pick up stuff for whoever's ailing or the funeral or whatever the tragedy is. But other people, we need to allow them the benefit to help.
Yeah.
We need to give ourselves permission to allow them to feel useful and help too.
So you hit on about half of the points that I have over here to review. When I talk about why are some people more prone than others to experience fatigue in this area, in the area of compassion and caregiving, a lot of the patterns that lead to that start in early childhood. And I know that might sound close to Freudian, but it's just true. We are socialized early in our lives on how to engage the world. So one of those things is an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. I was the first child. My mom had other children, and it became my responsibility to make sure everybody was okay, And in some environments where there may have been some other risk factors, that overdeveloped sense of responsibility was a necessity for survival. So it's important to honor that, recognize it and honor that. But then we have to look at whether or not it's serving us in our adult life health in a healthy way. Other directedness. A lot of young people from earlier generations have been raised to be selfless. You focus on other people. Don't be selfish. Pay attention to, respond to the needs of other people. So other directedness can be really heavily ingrained in how we conduct ourselves. And so we find ourselves doing that in adult life and realize, this may not be working out for me really well. I talked about the absence of boundaries, this impulse to rescue everything and everyone. That's what you're talking about, the hero complex, right? Go ahead.
And I think that there are some people that I will put labels because I'm not a therapist, but I think there are some people that are professional victims, and they are energy vampires, and they feed off of your attention, and that's really hard.
Yeah, it's important to pay attention to that. I also provide therapy for therapists, and so we have this conversation fairly regularly, in that it feels good to be needed. Can we tell the truth? It feels good. It makes you feel significant and effective. And if you're not careful, it could be somewhat of a high to always be in that seat where you're, and ironically, we're using the word empower, right? We're empowering people, but we have to tell the truth about what is it doing internally. And the harder thing to talk about, many people don't like to talk about, many people don't really acknowledge, is a history of unresolved pain and past trauma. And when we have those experiences, they do impact how we relate later on. Trauma usually requires people to kind of re-regulate and figure out how to find safety again. And a lot of us feel safer in the driver's seat. So then how do you get in the driver's seat? You become the leader, you become the caretaker, you become the one who's the go-to person. You become the one who controls everything, including the narrative. And so if we're not careful about that, then that predisposes us to find ourselves in a space where we have nothing else to give. Because shortly put, compassion fatigue is like, I have nothing else to give. A lot of people express it that way. Like they feel suffocated. They feel irritable. They don't want another person to ask them another thing. And so then they will isolate, and this other directedness can cause them to neglect themselves. Well, I don't have time. Self-care might sound good to you, but I don't have time for that, is one that you often hear. Well, we have to debunk that myth. And so you are absolutely right. You hit like almost every one of those factors that contribute to how people get to a place of feeling fatigue. How do we recover is the question. And the simple answer is a balanced, intentional, authentic self-care plan. What does that mean? It means you have to understand who you are.
And I think that one of the big things is not to beat yourself up for allowing yourself the opportunities to self-care.
That's right. Yes. Because of those things we talked about that contribute to us getting to this place of fatigue, all of those little nuances and innuendos and philosophies and patterns do contribute to feeling like, well, I can't take care of myself. And so it does require a shift in the way that we see self-care. Self-care isn't selfish, and for many of us, we have gotten that messaging that self-care is selfish. And unfortunately, for a lot of women, we've kind of been socialized to be selfless, and we have to rewrite that script. It's not selfish. It's actually quite thoughtful. It's thoughtful caregiving. You need to be healthy in order to caregive well. And so what happens when you wear yourself out is that it actually makes you a not so nice caregiver, an impatient caregiver, a mean caregiver, a neglectful caregiver. I had a funny chat with my daughter yesterday. She's she's going to turn 20. And we were just reflecting on some of her past sitters. And I didn't know this until yesterday when she said one of her sitters, she hated them. I knew she didn't like them. But she said they always told her, doesn't she have a room to go to? How horrible, right? And she said it was so bad that, she hated her so much, she would climb out her window and go hang outside. I thought, oh my goodness. And that was horrible caregiving. That was horrible caregiving. She wasn't attending to their needs. She was just being a physical person in the space. And so if we think about this in a healthy way, a balanced self-care plan, one that fuels you, lets you pour out, fuels you, lets you pour out, fuels you, lets you pour out, is thoughtful caregiving, right? You have something for you, and you can share some of you with whoever else needs you. Being mindful that you need to refuel, just like gas. There's only so far you're gonna go in the vehicle until you can hit the reserves. Caregiver fatigue is like when the light turns on and you're like in the reserves, and you're trying to guesstimate, like, I think I got another 3 miles I can end this before I get to the gas station. And so, but we know that we need to go get gas. And for some reason, in the way that we do service for other people, we often forget, no, you have to fuel up. If you're going to take a road trip across the country, you build it in. You're going to fill up before you get on the road. You're going to schedule a pit stop and go to the restroom and fill up.
And take a map.
And take a map and take a nap. Maybe take some pictures and document the process along the way, because you want an experience. And we don't take that approach a lot of times in our caregiving, but that approach is necessary. It's very necessary. Self-care is not simply the aromatherapy, the bubble bath, the manicure. It is also things like your annual exam, your follow-up dental care. One of the self-care aspects that can often go unnoticed is your filing systems. How do you manage your receipts? Tax time is a crisis for so many people. But the organization that contributes to having a smooth tax time is a part of self-care. Mm-hmm. Self-care is the things that you do on a regular basis to help you be able to respond to the challenges that you're going to face. And so it starts internally. It absolutely starts internally, understanding who you are and what you need. Like, I can be scattery. I know I need organization around me. Mm-hmm. If I don't take time to organize and disinfect and wipe things out in certain spaces, I'm just not going to be okay. That's self-care. And I had to work myself through that, because you got a deadline. Why are you sitting here with the Lysol wiping down your desk? Because I cannot breathe with all this going on like that. And so self-care, the way that we recover, the way that we take care of ourselves, the way that we rebound is through an authentic, sustainable self-care plan. Maybe getting up a little earlier, maybe scheduling help, maybe delaying something that seems absolutely urgent, but it's important but not urgent. Maybe budgeting a little bit differently. It's being authentic to understand who you are. You already said this, ask for help. Absolutely important. One of the hardest things to do for people who stay in the driver's seat. The most powerful helpers struggle with asking for help. Interesting dynamic.
Very true.
I remind my therapists all the time. I remind them all the time. If you are saying to people that they should entrust you with the journey, but you're not willing to entrust someone else, how do you reconcile that and feel comfortable about walking in your authenticity? because you're promoting a belief system to someone that you're not personally walking. So,
and it may be necessary for their growth to have the opportunity to succeed or fail at helping you.
absolutely, absolutely, it's not going to always be perfect. That's one of the things we know for sure. Building our resiliency. We are a resilient people. Now, that there's no way for us to be where we are right now. We've seen a lot transpire in our country, and we're resilient people. One of the examples that I use when I train on trauma is the fact that most of the people who find themselves in my trainings were old enough to remember 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, the way we were feeling and what we're going through now is evidence that we're resilient people. Like back then, we didn't know how we were going to overcome. And I use that because similarly to this pandemic that we're in, right? It happened to everybody.
Right.
We all lived it. You were not, you didn't escape the experience of that because you had a certain ethnicity, SES status, faith system. You didn't escape it. We were in it together if you were here in this country, and that's true right now for what we're experiencing with COVID-19. And so we are resilient if we can remember that and grab hold of that and use it to push us through, and actually be reflective about how did we make it through before. There are a lot of other things that we've had to kind of figure out how to recalibrate. How did we restart? How did we recalibrate? Because what works for me is not necessarily going to work for you, right, Peggy? It's
Right.
not. It's different. It needs to be individualized. It needs to be authentic to who you are as an individual. It needs to be sustainable according to your resources. Resources being your finances, your time, your energy, your support system, all of those things, because everyone doesn't have the same. And so it's very much important. For somebody, it might be that they can hire someone to come in and caretake. And for another person, it may be, I don't have anybody, but from 9 to 10, this is my time. I'm going to prepare them before 9. I'm going to follow up at 10:02. But from 9 to 10, this is my time, and I'm just not going to do anything unless it's an emergency.
So the big takeaway from this is you need to do the work for yourself.
That's the only way. That's the only way. There are some other points I want to briefly go over. The same way that we benefit from recognizing our resiliency, our history of resiliency, is the same way leads us into a need for gratitude. If I did it before, let me be grateful. I could do this. I did this, not just in me, but in how I got through it, and whatever structures were in place to help me get here now. I want to be grateful for them today. Those same structures may not necessarily move me forward, but they got me here. So now I have an opportunity to learn from that and move forward. Gratitude can be expressed in so many ways. I know in the beginning of this season, the stay-at-home process for many of us, I started intentionally writing letters to people and using the snail mail just to be intentional about gratitude, because we could get so negative focused that we lose sight of everything that we do have. We're Zooming and StreamYarding and doing all these amazing things with technology because we were forced to, but we actually have the tools to respond. What would we have done if we didn't have the tools? So being grateful for that.
I think a lot of people reconnected. I know that my sisters are out of state. And so on Sundays now, we never did this, and they've been out of state I'm the only one that was left in Florida for many, many years. And we would only see each other every once in a while or text each other every once in a while. And so now on Sundays, we have a standing Zoom, And we have reconnected and now caught up with each other's lives and laughed our butts off because it's just so nice. And it was funny because one of my sisters found it very difficult to want to do it. And then she did it the first time and it was like, oh, this is great. And so, you know, we've got to give that an opportunity to reconnect with people and meet them where they are.
Absolutely. There, about a couple weeks into the space that we're in now, I wrote a blog and I talked about this is a great time to do all the recycle, realign, reorganize, reuse. I know people who have dusted off recipe books that they hadn't seen in forever. You know, reconnect. I know I personally purged my closet so that I could make a donation to Dress for Success, because I figure when we come out of this, there are going to be some folks who might need to look at the job, you know, the workforce differently. So this was an amazing opportunity to realign. I speak with a number of my families and encourage them to look at your schedules. You're overcommitted. Your children are overscheduled. Reevaluate your value system, your priorities. You're being paid to do it. Half of them are, right? So it's easy to focus in on what's uncomfortable. And when you operate in a space of gratitude, it can thrust you into seeing the opportunities, because in our country, we have a very robust history of opportunities being birthed out of very trying times. I have to be true to who I am, and I think it's important to recognize, and research does back this up. But part of feeling better is re-engaging into some aspect of your spirituality. And I don't necessarily mean a structured religious system. I do subscribe to one, but that's not necessarily what I mean. Research backs that when we engage into some kind of spiritual practice, we do better in our health. We have better health outcomes. And so whatever that means for folks, I think it's important to do that. I personally have a model that I think your self-care plan should stem from that. Every other spoke of wellness should really flow out of you being true to who you are and what you believe, because that will influence the choices you make in your career, about how you think, about what you study, about who you engage your time with, how you organize your environment. You know, what we believe really colors everything that we do. It just happens so naturally that a lot of times people are not as intentional. But in developing a self-care plan, I strongly encourage intentionality. What do you believe? And walk into your spaces with that foundation. As a therapist, one of the things that we also talk about regularly is mindfulness. And simply put, not to be overly clinical, it's being present. It's sitting there, paying attention, giving someone 100% of your time and attention. Contrary to popular belief, no one multitasks well. Research has already backed this up, that you're not really doing a good job when you're trying to do 55 different things. It's very harmful to the brain to kind of just be like all over the place. You're doing all this multitasking and then you're trying to figure out why you can't focus. It's like being concentrated in the moment on whatever the task is.
I think a big part of that is to disconnect from our phones.
Yes.
That when my son comes home from work and he wants to tell me about his day, my phone is charging. I'm not looking at my phone. If it rings, I don't go over to my phone. I want to be present for him, to listen to what he has to say, to hear him because I'm not hearing him when I'm looking at my phone, and to really give him the respect. And I think that we need to realize that we are not beholding to our phone for anything, and that when I was young, you carried dimes, if you were out and about and you had a phone book, and no one fell apart. We all, you're okay. You don't have to be on that phone constantly.
That's correct. And you hit a point, a very powerful point, and actually one of the things that I could talk about forever and a day. We do have a current tendency to be inundated with screen time. It's not just phones. I mean, especially now, we have to use our technology to get some of our objectives done professionally. But if we tell the truth, we really are inundated with screen time. I was speaking with a young lady, and she just couldn't understand like why she was feeling the way she was, because she's like, I'm doing all my self-care, I'm doing all my, I'm doing my meditation, I'm doing my yoga, I'm exercising, I'm eating well. Why am I struggling? And I asked her to really consider what was unconsciously she was unconsciously being exposed to. We got the news, we got sometimes the radio, you maybe got NPR on or something like that. You got your app. I made the mistake of downloading a news break app every 5 seconds. I'm finding out that somebody's kid is kidnapped, and it's just and because we're in this pandemic, everyone is reporting on something, and it's a heightened awareness of what's happening, but it's coming to us through our screens. It's coming to us through our screens. People have their things playing automatically, and you're working, but you're listening, or you're working and you have another screen up. I joke my kids because of how often my daughter has 2 phones. I don't know why she has 2 phones. She's in the military. You don't need 2 phones. But we are inundated with the screen. And the beauty of this is now you can put some limits on your phone. You can monitor your screen time. You can limit your game access. You can, put a timer on there. So if you're gonna use screen time, I encourage a responsible plan for screen time. And if you have a family, I encourage some family rules around screen time. My children used to have to turn their phones into our rooms by a certain time, and they could get them later on. And then when
I love that.
yeah,
Great.
and then when they got a little bit older and they pushed back a little bit and they wanted us to trust that they were a little, responsible, we put an app on the phone, and that app blocked certain sites at certain times. It gave us some activity around, some understanding about their activity. There is a beautiful opportunity to use technology responsibly. And so I agree, this being really mindful about how we're using it so that it's not robbing us of those moments. There are major moments that you can miss if you're just, what's next? What's FOMO? Fear of missing out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you are going to miss out, but you're going to miss out on those interpersonal connections, on those connections. I love my walk in the morning, and I'll take random pictures of the animals, the birds, the ducks, just whatever, the squirrel. I get calm and peace through that. And it's being mindful and present.
And it's probably a healthier thing to do not to be walking with your phone and get run over by a car or hit by a bicycle.
I have to admit, I am walking with my phone, but I am listening to my music and taking pictures of things randomly. Like, I'm not walking with my phone in my hand, but I am walking with it. We just need to be intentional and responsible. At the end of the day, we need to be intentional and responsible. And the beauty is there are resources out there. I think accountability is helpful. A lot of times, we know people who are in similar situations that we are in, or we can engage trusted people who care about our well-being. And it may be that person who says, you just seem so tired. Is there anything I can do? Next time, say, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. When can you come over so we can talk about what things I need that you can do? And then maybe they can't come over. Maybe you're doing a Zoom and it like this, and you're across in different states. That maybe they can hold you accountable. Maybe they can call you when they're getting ready to do their study, or they're getting ready to do their walk, or they're gonna take a nap. They could do that with you. But accountability really helps us be true to the objectives that we say that we want to accomplish. And I strongly encourage that.
That's definitely a wonderful point. I think that that's the crux of it all, is that we have to be accountable to ourselves
Mhm.
and to put ourselves first, and to really make this a mission to to put the mask on first when you're
Yep,
the plane's going down,
that's
before
it.
you put the mask on everybody else in the plane who's dependent on you,
That's
and
it.
to really pay attention.
Yeah, we've heard if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That is true for self-care. You need a plan. You need a plan. You have to go forward with intention. And it's so easy when you've been so regimented to operate in this selflessness. It's so easy to default that if you don't put measured checkpoints and accountability marks in place, then you'll find yourself right back there. The key is compassion. The key is compassion. While we are being compassionate to others, we often forget to be compassionate to self. And we should practice that on ourselves first so that we can actually distribute a healthy dose of compassion. Because too much compassion, and there is a such thing, you showing up and you're doing everything for everyone, and you rob them of the opportunity of doing things for themselves. The imbalance. We are supposed to be balanced, and so it's important to recognize that. I love the symbolism of the butterfly, because if we interrupt that butterfly's process of hatching, the struggle, we will damage it. And so sometimes we think that because someone is struggling, we need to go and rescue. But that's not always true. Some of the most amazing things I've ever accomplished in my life, I had to go through a struggle, because in the midst of that struggle, I learned I could do some things. I learned statistics. I didn't think I could do statistics. Doctor, what? Statistics? I had to do that for myself. And no matter what I tried to do to evade it, it didn't work. And so for those of us who find ourselves in these roles, it's important to remember you could be robbing someone of some strength that they need to build, and then at the same time robbing yourself of some health that you need to be able to sustain. And short, why sacrifice and compromise your own well-being? What do we gain from that? We don't really.
I think that you actually shorten your life
Yes,
if you are always running to everyone else's care and not caring for yourself first.
I agree. I agree. I agree. There's some great resources out there. Believe it or not, there's a whole Facebook page out there, facebook.com/compassion fatigue.
Oh,
Um, mhm. I have a neat little book. I thought it was really neat. And it's not my book, it's Compassion Satisfaction 50 Steps to Healthy Caregiving. And it's got some really practical things in here. And it talks about one of the first things in here is the self-care plan. Self-care plan. How to address the caregiver, how to address the needs of the person you care for. And for those folks who are actually running organizations, there's some tips in there for them as well. There's a tool called the ProQual, and I'll email that to you, Peggy, so
okay.
you
And
can
then we'll put
have
it
it.
up.
Yeah, and it helps you answer some questions to see what level of compassion satisfaction are you experiencing versus burnout versus vicarious trauma, because there's not enough time to even begin to talk about vicarious trauma. Um, at the end of the day, recognizing the signs. Some symptoms include irritability, anger, um, apathy, like feeling like there's is no hope, there's nothing else, some doubt, self-doubt, poor self-care, anxiety, isolating, minimizing. Someone says, you really need to get some rest. No, I'm fine. Being on like an emotional roller coaster, being hyper vigilant, like waiting for the next, when's the next, someone said, one of my clients said to me today, I just feel like I'm waiting for the next, when's the next shoe gonna drop? When's the next, and that's tough, having difficulty concentrating, being forgetful, disoriented, just not feeling like yourself.
Can't sleep.
Can't sleep, that's it, and sleep disturbance and nightmares. When it's getting to that point where like your daily functioning is impaired, I strongly encourage seeking a mental health professional. That mental health professional should be familiar with compassion fatigue, because what you don't want to do is have them say, oh, just schedule a vacation for a week and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's deeper than that. And chances are you've got to work through those things that predispose you to be there in the first place. And so I strongly encourage a helping professional. There are a number of us that are out there who know how to do this well, but you can, many qualified mental health professionals will offer a consultation, a no charge consultation to see if it's a good fit. I encourage everyone to take that opportunity when they're looking to invest, because just like any other provider or any other service, it's not guaranteed to be a good fit. And people have a tendency to just stop. You try that medication, it didn't work. It didn't. I tried medication, it doesn't work. I went to the nail salon and it was bad. And so it's like, you know what, when I go get this done, it breaks my nails, I just decided not to do it. Maybe they didn't apply it well. Maybe they didn't know what they were doing. So really moving forward and being persistent in finding the right fit. Sometimes you got to change your surgeon. Sometimes you got to change your dentist. Sometimes you got to, everyone's not guaranteed to be the right fit, but being persistent to find the right fit so you can actually have someone journey alongside you to be well and live a good quality of life.
It could be a lifesaver.
It really can be. It really can be. And it feels so much better to be able to walk in a space and be authentic to who you are, say what you really want to say. A lot of times in this topic, people hesitate to say what they really want to say or what they're really feeling and thinking because they don't want to be judged. If someone you love is battling a chronic medical condition, maybe even battling their life, chances are you're not going to feel comfortable telling someone that you're angry with them because they didn't take care of themselves. Not likely. Chances are you're not going to say, well, what about me? My needs are not getting met. Not likely. And so the beauty of connecting to a mental health provider or even a support group of people who share the similar experiences gives you a sense of safety. And when you have that sense of safety, then you're more apt to be honest. And it's not until you're honest that you can actually grow and change. There's no sense in seeing a therapist if you're going to lie. No sense.
What a waste of money.
It is, but people do it.
That's so crazy. You have given us so many things to think about and so many pieces of a plan to start to lay out a good plan and work ahead. And if they need help, then they know that help is out there. And that, to me, most important of all is you're not alone.
Not alone. It can happen to any of us, honestly. The beauty of it is that we can all get out of it.
Thank you
And
so much.
yes, the power is in your hands to get out of it. Thanks for having me,
Thank
Peggy.
you so much. It's been enlightening, and I know that this is a problem that many, many people face, and I appreciate your time, Dr. Shanae, and I know that you have other clients tonight, and I hope that people will stay tuned for more programs with us.
Have a good night.